It will be.
Yeah, I'm 21. Yeah. Even if you invert it, it's still better. 63. You know, Mom called me this morning. 2 years. Today marks 2 years. Yeah.
65 now?
Yeah.
Father-in-law went through that at 62.
There you go. There you go. Oops, here. We're all using that one. Yeah, what the heck. Make it super official. All right, I got these papers, revised papers. Leave that for Mike. Okay, you all set? Okay, let me call to order the Fox Canyon Groundwater Management Agency meeting. Could you please rise? Supervisor Bennett, would you lead us?
Hand over heart. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, very good. Okay, roll call, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Here.
Director Andrews?
Here.
Director Bennett?
Here.
Director Borchard?
Here.
Okay, and it's my understanding that Dr. Kelly is on his way. I chatted with Sam, and he said he's on his way, so if he doesn't show up, Sam will jump up here and have heard anything while we go on, okay? Agenda review, any changes on the agenda?
Yes, Chair, we have 3 items. Item number 7, there was a late request by one of your board members to move that to the July meeting.
Okay.
Item number 8, we have not heard back from the auditor, so we're going to ask that be moved to the June meeting. And on behalf of the entire GMA staff, I've been asked to wish you a very happy birthday today.
Oh, that's why the balloons. What's that? The distinguished gentleman from the 63. I'm 63. I knew you thought I was 12, but I am 63. Yeah, all right. If you took the 63 and inverted it, that's even better yet. I'll accept that. But anyway, thank you very much. I tried to swat, when I saw him, I tried to swat him, and it doesn't lend itself to that. But anyway, thank you very much. Okay, let's go with public comments. Anybody have any items for the GMA? All right, seeing none, very good. Board member comments? Thank you for the birthday wishes. I appreciate that.
Just a quick one, Chair. Item number 8, the draft work plan and preliminary requested budget study session. I'm not sure what's intended for today's meeting, but I didn't have any of these materials with me and kind of feel uncomfortable having a study session without having looked at any of it beforehand. So I don't know what the rest of the board thinks about that, but
in your packet, you didn't have this?
no, this is the 2010-11. This is the 11-12. I'm sorry. Draft work plan and study session for the budget.
Chair Mulhart, I guess I could have a quick response to that. Yes, we want to apologize for getting the materials out for you. This is actually a 2-stage process. Today we're going to essentially introduce the subject and walk you through the numbers. There's no action that's going to be taken today.
Okay, very good.
And we'll be back in June essentially with the same item for your approval.
Board member comments? Okay, we have one item on the consent agenda, approval of minutes. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to vote on it, even though, I mean, the way the thing worked out, not everybody was here for all of it and all that. So I think we just have to approve it because we don't have 3 votes if we waited for everybody. Only the people.
All
that
right,
were
so
here.
let's just have. I'm sorry. Let's have a. Yeah, let's just do it as a roll call then.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
I'll abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
Okay. I guess, in fact, I shouldn't have voted because I wasn't here either, but.
Well, that was my point.
There you go.
I also had to leave at 2:15. We wouldn't have had 3 votes. So my point is, to make democracy work, we had to approve the minutes even though we didn't have 3 votes.
So you can take mine to abstain then.
Okay.
Change it to abstain. We have 3 votes. Okay.
We don't.
Oh.
I have to abstain also. That's my
Carry
point.
the next meeting.
No, 3/4.
You're here for half.
3/4, right.
Okay. So we'll let his count, mine won't.
We have 2 3/4 votes.
We have 3 votes. Dan Nauman was here. Oh, he said yes. So, legal, we can look at it. If you're happy with the way it was done, approve it. If not, put it back on the agenda for the next go-around.
You can get up and let Dan sit there.
Yeah. Al, what's your ruling?
Well, it's up to the board members, whether or not they were present, whether they feel that they are able to approve the minutes. If not, then I would recommend that it
Okay.
be continued to the next meeting.
Okay. If that's the case, then put my vote back in then. I've read through the minutes. I'm okay with the minutes. All right, so we should have everybody there, except for Neil will be abstaining, right? Okay.
I would be happy to vote.
All right, if there's nothing illegal, let's do the vote again. Let's,
Why don't you not do it? Just do a...
okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none. It's done. All right. All right, there we go. Informational items. Let's deal with item number 2.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart. Happy birthday, by the way, and other directors. For the record, Brian Bondi presenting item 2, Los Postos Basin specific.
No gift? I'm sorry, it just dawned on me.
His presence is the gift.
I think Carol Schoen has some chocolates from Switzerland.
Oh.
Bring them with you? No. I'm ill-prepared. I apologize.
There you go.
Item 2, our regular monthly update on the status of the Los Postos Basin planning effort. Last month, I described the progress that was made at the April meetings. Today, we'll briefly describe what we were working on in April. There were 2 meetings, in May. There were 2 meetings in May, one on the 11th and one on the 25th. And I just have a few slides that will summarize what we've been talking about. I put this slide in for the benefit of Director Andrews. In the Los Postos basins, we're dealing with 2 issues. We have 3 subbasins, the west, east, and south. In the west Los Postos subbasin, we have an overdraft problem that's manifested itself in terms of a large pumping depression. In the east and south Los Postos basin, we have an issue where we're looking at water quality problems, primarily high chlorides that have invaded the basin and are working their way through the shallow aquifers into the deep aquifer. So I see your head nodding, so you understand the issues. We've been talking about a series of phased solutions for our management approach. Over time, we have a goal of improving water quality and increasing the reliability of the water supply in the area. And so we've laid out sort of 3 sets of actions over 3 planning horizons. First, I'll describe this medium-term planning horizon. This is really the meat of what we're going to be doing in the basin for the foreseeable future. We're looking at establishing a new or revised pumping allocation system. And when we do that, we're looking to tie that to some sort of approach that will generate a funding mechanism to pay for replacement water to deal with the overdraft and water quality issues. The most likely source for replacement water will come from desalting our shallow marginal quality groundwater that I mentioned on the previous slide. These sets of approaches can be implemented in approximately 5 years, maybe a few years sooner. It's tied to the schedule of construction of the salinity management pipeline by Cayugas Municipal Water District. That facility needs to come up into the basin and be available for folks to dispose of their brine, basically. And we've talked about most of this before. But what we have is a period of several years between now and when the salinity management pipeline is available, where we're going to be doing a lot of important planning. There's a number of project concepts out on the table in terms of some folks may do a desalter here, maybe we have a regional desalter. We need to put all that together and do a feasibility study to figure out what set of projects or project can accomplish all of the basin plan goals. So there needs to be some engineering design work that's done. We also need to figure out how to convey that water through the basin to areas that are in overdraft or in need of water for blending. So we have some planning activities that are going to be laid out for the short term, first 3 to 5 years. We're also going to need to put a number of interim measures in place. We're talking today about the potential for continuing some sort of pumping cap like we have in Emergency Ordinance D. That was the discussion today. Nothing's been decided, but that's generally what we've been discussing. Long term, as we develop the shallow groundwater resource, we should be creating space in that aquifer. And the idea there is that the stormwater events that now just kind of flow out through the basin and don't really recharge, now they have an opportunity to percolate. So over long term, that'll help improve water quality. We may need to do some engineering projects to help that process through. But that's sort of the vision for the long-term approach. We'll also be looking at other replacement water options for the long term as well. I don't have my glasses on. This is kind of fuzzy. I don't know if it's fuzzy for you guys. The details aren't important here. What you're looking at is a timeline of a set of parallel actions that are being laid out for the short-term planning horizon for the West Las Posas Basin. We're talking about the interim cap that I mentioned. We're going to have monitoring. And here's where the planning activities will take place, developing our replacement water options and developing our allocation system and funding mechanisms. Same for the east and south. Looks very similar. Won't go into the differences. Only to mention that we add operational criteria for Callegas's ASR facility. That'll be an important piece of what needs to be put in place for the east and south Las Posas basins. And what I'm talking about there are a set of interim operational rules that they will agree to operate under while we're learning more about the basin. Medium-term implementation of our desalter projects will happen, again, 3 to 5 years out. We'll have a new pumping allocation system in place. We'll have replacement water available and a mechanism to fund for that. We'll be monitoring and evaluating progress of these medium-term strategies. And at any point in time, the group can look at implementing any of a variety of long-term or additional management strategies that are necessary to improve water quality or reliability. In reference to our progress, where are we at on our schedule? A copy of the schedule is included as item 2D. Basically, in a nutshell, we're mostly done talking for now. We're going to switch into writing mode. We're going to start drafting sections of the management plan and providing them to the group for review and comment. June through August will be focused on writing and the comments. Per our schedule, we're targeting September for adoption by the users group and a presentation to your board in October and potentially asking your board to adopt the management plan in December. So this is consistent with the schedule you were given in January. We've juggled things around a little bit as we've dealt with some issues ahead of others. But as far as I'm concerned, we're still on target and still hopeful that we can meet the schedule.
And I was hoping that we could stick with our policy of every time we put an acronym up, we at least say what the acronyms mean the first time around, please. So LPUG, BSB, PM for people.
Basin Specific Management Plan and Las Posas Users Group.
Thank you.
I apologize. So everything looks great, but we do still have some big challenges ahead. First and foremost, we need to maintain the level of cooperation, the great level of cooperation that we've seen so far, and get the plan done, cross the finish line. Looking ahead to implementation of the plan, we have some big things that need to be done in terms of figuring out the feasibility of different projects and how to optimize the different projects that have been put on the table. That'll help us figure out how to convey water through the basin. And lastly, we need to deal with some governance and funding issues. But per County Council's review of the GMA's ordinance, not the ordinance, but the enacting legislation, the agency is limited in its ability to use funds for water projects. So we'll probably have that looked at again, but assuming that that's true, we may need to look at some other mechanism for collecting funds and turning them into water through the projects.
With regards to that, I had, before the meeting, I had said to Al, If the issue is, does the GMA enabling legislation allow us to act as effectively a trustee for the funds in a specific area? If it doesn't allow us to do that, I have no problem asking the board to go and change the legislature to allow us to do that. So from a mechanical standpoint, I think we can ultimately fix that square if in fact it's part of the plan and we just have to change some of our wording around. I think we can get that done. With regards to another issue he raised, and that is the state's ability to raise steal funds out of certain agencies and the like, and I may not have summarized it correctly. That may be more problematic. And as I said to Al before the meeting and to Jeff, it may be that we have to be somehow creative in the process. And it may be that we have to have maybe a banking institution act as holding the funds and the GMA board act as a administrator of the fund. I don't know what the hybrid is, but if this is what it takes to solve the problem in the area, change our legislation, come up with some way to put the funds in a protected area so that the funds are used for the benefit of those individuals that put the money into the fund, then we're going to figure out a way to make it work. And I recognize there's potentially some legal issues involved with that, but we'll just have to work our way through it.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else on this issue? Anybody else have any comments, questions? Okay. Okay, receive and file on item number 2. Any objection? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. Let's go to number 3.
Good afternoon, Chair Molhart, board members, members of the audience. Before I start, we have a few gifts that we'd like to present.
Oh my goodness, what is this? Oh, tokens. Squeezy things. Oh my goodness. Do I get all 3 or do I have to choose? Oh, look at that. That one is there. Look at that. Very good. Thank you very much on behalf of Public Works. It's a little bit too small. All righty.
So my item today that I'm presenting is the third quarter work plan update. You have a staff report in front of you as well as a detailed...
Let me interrupt for a second. Brian, for the record, they brought gifts. I don't want to say anything, but they did bring gifts. Just an observation.
The tractor alone's $1.5 million.
Yeah. I mean, it's just a gift. No comment. I'm sorry.
We do what we can. This item today is written reports. We have the staff report as well as the detailed worksheets to describe our work activities for this month. I do not have a PowerPoint presentation for you, just a few verbal comments regarding our work effort. In regards to the management software, we are at the point where it is active and live for a few accounts, very few that we're actively looking to correct. We're also looking to complete phase 2 of the software and have that ready to go by the end of June. Regarding our non-reporting operators, unregistered wells, and flow meter calibration, there's another spreadsheet table as part of your packet today that describes some of our activity. If you'll look at some of the page 2 and page 3, you can see that we've completed or done with many of the cases that are outlined, and we may continue to make good progress on the remainder. There's about 4 or 5 that are remaining that we continue to engage the operators to get their accounts either corrected for the unpaid charges, meter calibration, or unregistered wells. So I wanted to point out that that effort is coming together quite well with the effort of staff as well as our consultants, the source group. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Gerhard? Anybody in the audience have any questions? Okay, very good. All right, let's go to item number 4, please.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart, members of the board. For the record, Gerard Kapusik with the agency staff. And let me chime in with a slight Teutonic twist and say, Fröhliche Geburtstag, Herr Mulhart.
Thank you.
I am pleased to present the third quarter budget performance report and would ask that you just open the large sheets that were included in the packet. We'll be referencing to a few items there, but both Gerhard and I will have more detailed sum-ups on the PowerPoint when we get to item 9. But I do want to point out some general metrics for the third quarter to tee up for the discussion of the budget for next year. With respect to page 1 of 7 on the board letter, the table pretty well summarizes the top 3 metrics through the third quarter. Approximately $3 million in funding sources were available to fund operations through the third quarter, of which 2.3 were carryover balances from last year, and approximately $750,000 in operating revenues, including surcharge payments received through March 31st. Approximately about 90% of the budgeted target period for revenue for the third quarter was reached. With respect to expenditures, just a little over $848,000, including the preserving of the reserve for contingencies through third quarter, so a similar metric, about 90% of the target on expenditures were reached through the third quarter. And assuming that this trend continues through June 30th, the projected year-end fund balance would be about $1.3 million, of which $500,000 of that, per your board's direction, is sequestered in the GEMS litigation fund. So really only about $800,000 is available for subsequent year funding in fiscal 11-12. And you'll see this play out when we get to 9. So in general, those are sort of the top 3 metrics through the third quarters. If you will fast forward to page 3 of 7 of the board letter, based on the pumping metrics, there's substantially less self-reported extractions in calendar year 2010, just about 117,000 acre feet, all but about 393 of that was in 2010, and that small number reflected previous year's pumping that was just reported in 2010. This is significantly below the 30-year average of about 130,000 acre feet of pumping, and is a dip in 2010 extraction self-reported, and has had a commensurate roughly 60,000 reduction in projected revenue for this year as a consequence of that lesser amount of water being reported so far. This represents about 90% of what would be expected for the year. There are some pumping statements still coming in that are lagging in order to get to year-end, but you can a fairly high confidence level that this is about 90% of what the year-end figure will be in terms of groundwater pumping in 2010. This is important because in discussion of the budget for 11-12, what should we budget for in the future, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that item. With respect to page 4 of 7, the surcharge metric, initially in the 10-11 budget that your board adopted, the budget recognized the 2 settlement payments totaling $230,000 that are due in fiscal 10-11, and those will not come due until the fourth quarter, but they are on track. And it also assumed that there might be 2 periods of surcharge payments by the large pumper on the Oxnard Plain, and as you know from the mid-year report, only one of those happened. So we had originally projected about $500,000 in surcharge, $800,000 in surcharge. Combining all those, it looks like we're going to be close to $500,000 in surcharge revenues in the current year by June 30th, because the large-scale pumper found another way to obtain water, at least during the first 6 months, and did not pump, and therefore did not trigger surcharge. So that's an important metric. With respect to the PWAC charges on page 5 and 6 of the staff report, if you just go to the top table, you can see the historical context of the numbers and what the 10-11 budget, third quarter actuals, and projected year-end. There is one post-printing correction that needs to be made to that table. If you look at the row for 10-11 Q3 actuals, it's currently showing 4,471 hours. The correct figure should be 4,672 hours, so if you'll note that correction. And then the blended cost figure, by dividing that 4,672 into 501, comes out to $107.37 instead of the 118. The 501,652 figure is accurate, so I apologize for that minor correction. But if we annualize that trend through June 30th, and we don't know whether that'll be in fact be the hours reported, it looks like we will need to have about a 6,200 hour figure for PWAC charges that are about 670,000, and the board letter identifies the transference of contingency reserve, which is sufficient capacity in the budget to fund that. We'll have a better feel at the June meeting of whether we came close to that number. We certainly will not exceed that number.
Mr. Chairman? May I
Yes.
ask a question on that?
Yes.
Thank you. It does look like that's about a 12.5% or thereabouts run over what you had budgeted. Can you, as for a person who can't always follow every detail of this, can you explain to me the reasons for that?
I'd be happy to. In the 10-11 budget, we projected a level of effort based on the work plan reviewed and adopted by the board, and there was an understanding that we may need to ramp that up, particularly on enforcement activities over the course of the year. Staff has brought in the quarterly reports documentation of that ramped up effort and shared that with the board, and that's essentially what's happened. We've aggressively moved to get rid of legacy issues in 10-11. It's just cost us more in time and dollars to do that. In a short version, that's the answer to that question. And you'll see that when we get to the item number 9 in terms of the additional tasks that are being projected for 11-12 are significantly less because we've worked through a number of legacy issues this year. But there was a commensurate increased hours and therefore cost associated with that level of effort.
All right, thank you.
And so therefore, if these third quarter trends are annualized and hold true as indicated, we project about a 1.3 million year-end fund balance, which only about 829,000 of that would be available for next year, and then we'll set this up for the item 9 presentation on 11-12. But those are the key metrics for the current year. So fiscally healthy, strong. It cost us a little more in time and dollars than what we had projected, but we brought the board along in terms of identifying what that level of effort has been. Your board has given us certain additional work to do to work those legacy issues, and we tried to do that consistent with the resources you've given on the aggregate.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions? All right, very good. Okay, let me find my paperwork here. Okay. All right, let's go to action item number 5.
Yeah. Chair Mohart, board members, it's my pleasure, and a bit of sadness, but great honor to honor one of our own today, Mr. Dave Panaro. Dave, would you come up, please? And we have a resolution for you, which I guess will need to be acted on. But Dave, we do want to acknowledge you and your 14 years of service to the agency, including working on the meter calibration program and successfully leading that forward, as well as the technical guidance advisory group, strategic advisory group, among many other things. And on a personal note, I wrote down a few things that had always been impressionable on me from Dave, and one of them was he's Mr. Dependable. Always at work, always on time, always a good attitude, always willing to do whatever was asked. And also Mr. Customer Service, willing to take the calls, the walk-ins, provide questions or provide answers to questions and direct them in the right direction. So, Dave, I just want to thank you for your effort, and we do have a little plaque with our little bit of appreciation. And I don't know if you want to say a few words, but
I'm assuming you're going to approve this, so I'll thank you for it.
We're going to approve it. Let me before you speak, Dave. Let me make a couple comments, and then we'll approve it, and that way you know it's in. When I first met you, I just realized when I first met you, you had more hair on your head. It was not gray. It was just like Rick, and even Sam McIntyre had dark hair at the time. I mean, I'm really stretching here, right? Anyway,
I think Sam will agree with me that this is what happens if you stay here too long.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I recall, and now I see you and I wonder, did we do this to you? If we did, we apologize. Anyway,
I think it's partly genetic.
Yeah, well, we're all in that same boat, except Bob Aranio. I mean, he just never turns gray. Anyway, thank you very much for 14 years. You have done a great job.
Thank you.
And, you know, you've watched us as a little agency kind of work our way through problem after problems. I wish I could tell you that going forward these problems will all disappear, but you know better, it won't. So the work you have done for us and the help you've given this agency has helped us reach where we are today, and we got a long ways to go, but I want to personally thank you.
Well, thank you.
And enjoy your retirement and your other endeavors. So.
Actually, I haven't retired. I needed to make some changes in my life. I've moved over to the hydrology section, so I will be taking care of all the stream and rain gauges in Zone 3, which is Moore Park, Thousand Oaks, Simi area.
Oh, very good.
And I learned a lot here, and I will miss all of you, seeing you on a regular basis. And I think it's been a real good education for me, too. And I appreciate all the help and all the nice people that I've met here.
Yeah, good for you. You're going to leave the sea breeze and go to the heat of the...
yeah, it's more, figured out the groundwater thing. Now I'm going to try the surface water thing.
Yeah,
so
there you go. Well, very
anyway,
good.
thank you very much, all of you.
All right. Well, listen, we need a motion. Hold on before you leave. We need a motion to approve Resolution 2011-03.
So moved.
In a second?
I would like to second that, Chair.
All right. Let's do it as a roll call, please.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchard?
Yes.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you, Dave, very much.
Thank you again.
All right. Let's deal with item number 6, please.
Again, Gerhard Hubner, for the record, Watershed Protection District. I will also be presenting this item. I do have a presentation, which I would like them to bring up, please. And this is item number 6, Groundwater Supply Enhancement Assistance Program Agreements. A little bit of background. As you recall, back in June of last year, you approved the funding and the criteria in the amount of $500,000 that created the program. At your September meeting, you established through Resolution 2010-06, the general category and types of projects that were eligible, and then this year in January, your board approved the priority project ranking and the recommended funding list. So as you recall, and again, this is also in the board packet, these were the 5 projects that you ranked in order of, I think this was the order that we ranked them, but you did make some modifications and increased funding on the Waterworks District's project, and one project was not recommended for funding and was deleted. Subsequently, staff and agency council worked together to develop a model GSAP grant agreement. We took that model agreement and first shared it with the city of Camarillo, since they were the highest ranked project. Upon their comments and revisions, we then distributed the agreement to the rest of the grant recipients. And to date, we do have concurrence and or received final approval from all 5 parties from their respective councils and boards. As to the agreement, the intent as we were constructing this was to make it as easy to read and administer, easy to administer as possible, both from the our perspective, the staff perspective, as well as the grantees. Also that it be understandable, but also have clear accountability for the agency's GSAP funds that were going to be expended under various projects. All the agreements have essentially the same recitals, few exceptions for the unique situation of that particular city or entity. There's general terms, there's the term and the amount of funds that were going to be awarded, tailored to each grant recipient. We do require an annual progress report be submitted by December the 1st of each year, and then upon completion, a final project report. And lastly, that it would be categorically exempt under CEQA.
So in conclusion, we believe the program is meeting the original intent as it was created. I just put this up there. Actually, in some cases, the leveraging is at a higher ratio than even this 5-to-1. That's an average. So that's a very, very good ratio if you look at other grant programs. We have received concurrence in all the agreements from all parties. In order for the funds to be distributed, however, and be timely, and the work to begin on July 1st, we need to have these agreements in place. So you have a couple options today. After hearing from the various stakeholders, you can consider and adopt these agreements. Alternatively, you can modify them subject to concurrence with the parties, or you can reject them, of course, and then direct us to renegotiate them. Our recommendation today is that you approve the attached agreements and direct the executive officer to sign the agreements on behalf of the agency. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, first of all, any questions, any of the members? Dave?
Gerhard, these contracts all mention a similar kind of a disbursement of grant funds, and it says, essentially all of them say at 50 and 100% project completion milestones. But it doesn't say what those are. Is the application part of each contract?
Yes.
And that delineates the milestones?
Correct. Essentially, you reference the application and what they said that they would do by X date, and so that becomes part of the agreement.
So the application has in it a 50% milestone, what that is and, and what it, okay.
Right.
Because we didn't see any of that, so it seemed a little vague, just looking through these.
Yeah, the easiest thing for me was essentially to whatever they committed to in their application is what we were going to hold them to.
Okay. And then secondly, why do we need 45 days to pay them?
It's just
You can't pay
generally
any
what it
quicker than
takes to do the county process.
Just to get through the county system, or?
Yeah, it could be 30 days, and I've talked with folks, it might be sooner, but that's generally, we've left a little bit of wiggle room. I didn't want to say 30 days or less, and then if we couldn't somehow accomplish that there would be some interest or penalties on our side.
You
I
don't
left a
want to
little
tie
bit
it down.
of,
Okay.
yeah, and I didn't receive any feedback that was unworkable by the other parties.
Being on the receiving end of grants in the past, I know that sometimes after expending funds, you're very eager to get that reimbursement.
Our intent
If that could be coming forthright, or your intention to be get it out quicker, that'd be, I think, well appreciated by the recipients.
I think at our end, we'll be able to review the invoices and process them pretty quickly, and then it's just a matter of, and when it goes upstairs, how quickly they can cut that check.
Mike?
Mr. Hubner, as an example, Camarillo's attachment, item 3, it says...
What page are you on?
This is 2 of 7.
In
6A.
In Camarillo's.
Yeah,
2
and
of 7.
my point only is that, in a follow-up of Director Borchardt's question, it just outlines the project as Exhibit A, and my question is, how many pages would have had to been involved for you to include Exhibit A so we could have that with the grant?
Some of them were, some were very short and some were lengthy. I don't remember.
The Reader's Digest version would be great.
On terms of what are you looking for what the grant application? Was that your question?
Yeah, what are they going to do? I know we had a heading on the original proposals, but never an outline.
Okay. In terms of the city of Camarillo, well, with your pleasure, we do have representatives from the city.
I don't think we need to spend the time on that. I mean, if you could just give it to us later,
Okay.
so I would appreciate knowing in detail what the things were, but I don't suspect that we need to listen to it all right now.
Okay.
It may be that, given this is the first time, and who knows what monies we'll have in the future, if we'll ever be able to do it again, but assuming we can, just as kind of since we're all kind of learning this process together, maybe the thing to do is when you give us the grant agreement, you make essentially an executive summary of the key elements of the project as the attachment and make it part of the agreement. Because I can see some of these getting very thick and some very thin, and the truth is we're not all going to read the thick ones.
Right.
But having some summary of it would be good for other future applicants to see exactly what the logic that we may have used, so maybe we could do that in the future.
I suspect Lucy's going to make a garden out by the plant so that she can have her afternoon tea there or something.
Wow, I doubt it, but certainly, if you want, off the top of my head, that particular work is they're going to do data collection studies to support their EIR and some of the things that actually we had asked for to support moving that desalter project forward.
Okay, thank you. Any other directors have questions? All right, it seems to me we could do, okay, yes, sir.
It's just a definition for me. What are surface geophysics?
Surface geophysics, essentially this is where they go out there, they have the truck, they run the lines, they do essentially create sound and measure in the subsurface the reaction to the substrata, the geology, record that. So it's trying to get a 3D picture of the subsurface with essentially surface geophysical techniques.
They thump the ground and then listen to the echo.
Yeah.
I understand that.
Okay. We have a couple possibilities, just so that we kind of lay the foundation how we're going to do this. We can go through each of these agreements or have each of the applicants make a presentation, or we can take the recommendations of staff and the information that we've had and approve them all as one big package, or we can approve them individually. What do you folks want to do?
Chair, with the rest of the director's approval, I would move we approve the whole package.
I would second that motion.
I think that's a great choice.
Okay.
Unless anybody has an objection to that. All right. Can I have a motion to approve staff's recommendation to... Oh, no, did we have the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, you did? Oh, okay. You're right. Yeah. So there's a motion, there's a second. Okay, I'm sorry. It's balloons, they're bothering me. So. By the way, I don't fly with balloons in the airplane. Sam thinks I do, because I've heard that numerous times, but in the first 20 feet of the takeoff roll, they're gone. I tried. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Andrews?
Yes.
Director Bennett?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I just wish to express one thing. I do concur that in the future on these kinds of things, there ought to be at least an executive summary of the work plan. Thank you.
Okay, so that'll be, for the next ones that we do, that'll be fine. Okay, item number 7 is going to go to July. Item number 8 will go to June because we don't have the answers yet. So we're now down to item number 9.
Chair Mulhart, Gerhard Hubner again for the record. This will be a 2-part presentation. I will be doing approximately half of it, or the first 10 slides. Gerard will do the second half. I will be presenting essentially the work task or work plan component of the proposed fiscal year 2011-2012 fiscal budget. I want to remind folks that this is, or board members, that this is going to be a 2-part process. Today is a study session where we'll be introducing what we propose in terms of work effort along with the budget. So our presentation today, as I mentioned, will overview of the annual work plan. Gerard will do the fiscal year preliminary budget portion of it. A little bit of background, as we usually do with these presentations. Back in 2008, at your direction, we developed the formal annual process of developing the annual work plan as a first step in crafting the agency's fiscal year budget. Attached to this presentation and the materials that you received either this morning via email or today, you'll find the work plan as well as the preliminary budget, and we'll walk you through some of those numbers. How did we get to where we are today? Well, we didn't just do this in a vacuum. It wasn't just Gerard and myself. We involved all the agency staff. We did meet formally twice and several times informally in crafting both the accomplishments, looking at the past, what we've accomplished, what we've completed, and where we needed to go into the future with our priorities in mind, the needs, and the agency's mission, goals, and objectives. So let me just start with the staffing. We propose for next year to have 2.3 full-time equivalents. That's what FTE stand for. On the core task, we propose 0.38 FTEs to perform what we call the additional tasks. If you remember, there were 13 in this year's work plan. We've proposed to move some of them. Some of them have been completed and will be deleted, and we have 7 proposed for next year. We anticipate no increase in staff proposed for fiscal 11 and 12. I do want to state, though, that some of these numbers that we've come up with may be subject to revision. They're our best estimates at this point. As we look at what we utilize in terms of staffing and PWAC charges, we may need to revise those numbers either up or down. As you see here, this is 1.3 FTEs less than what we have in this year's current budget. It is consistent with historical staffing levels during the past 5 years. We do anticipate some savings due to our staff geologist vacancy. As you noted, Dave has left and moved to another position in watershed. We will be conducting recruitment to backfill his position. And we also propose, of course, continuing the funding of the United Joint Technical Staff position. There will be a reduction in our cost because it's proposed that that will now be a 3-way agency cost split between United, the GMA, and CAEDIS. The work plan is similar to past years, is organized in under core tasks. We have our administration, budget, and fiscal services, record services, technical services, as well as legal. We have 7 additional work tasks that are proposed for next year. We still have the non-reporting filings. There's approximately 80 of those that we anticipate. These are folks that don't submit any paperwork. And so there's some follow-up. We will need to know whether they are extracting groundwater. If not, it's a case of us not knowing. There are a few cases that I mentioned in my previous presentation under number 2 that we need to follow through on. There's about 5 or 6 of those, and some level of effort will be needed with that. We have our local groundwater assistant grant. If you decide to proceed with that, that will be considered at a future meeting. We have our Los Posas specific sub-basin management plan tasks. We'll be working under number 5 there. Our groundwater management plan is coming up for its 5-year review, and we'll be looking to scope out what that might look like as we move closer to 2012. We have our GSAP program. That depends whether we have funds to administer that, and then we still have the placeholder for the Oxnard Pleasant Valley sub-basin management plan development. So we've organized this, and you can see where everything is, at least in the core task. This is the first slide, and the hours and the FTEs. Again, agency administrative staff, our record services, our technical services, and our agency legal services. In this slide, I want to point out a few things that either will be a continuation or some things that have changed. We will be rolling out our new software, completion of the phase 2 and the training. Some of the work plan tasks, we've taken the legacy enforcement compliance issues, the unregistered wells, meter calibration, and pump charges. We've collapsed that into one row. Same with the integrated regional groundwater issues, stakeholder meetings. Again, we've collapsed those. We saw similarities. Meter calibration. Now that we've finished one round of that, we'll be looking now to institute the next round at some point. We believe that's a core task that will continue with the agency into the future. And our irrigation allowance index program, as we roll that out, and we feel that will be a core portion of the agency's functions. We've left some placeholders for legal services, consultant services, and then if there's an opportunity to apply for a grant, if the board chooses. Under additional work tasks, I've described some of these already, the non-reporting, the extraordinary groundwater management enforcement. Again, those are the legacy, a few of those legacy issues left. And then at the bottom here, you can see some of the hours for the GMP update, the 2012 update, in terms of level of effort and cost. So with that, I'll turn over the presentation to Gerard, and be happy to answer any questions. Perhaps it's best, go ahead, Director Borg.
Maybe a quick one.
Yeah.
On additional work tasks, number 6, Oxnard PV. Do you expect that to take place this next year? They haven't really begun their meetings yet, have they?
Well, exactly. I mean, essentially that's on hold. We're waiting. We anticipate there'll be that those meetings will pick up at some point.
You expect that to be this coming year?
The answer is yes. At some point.
When?
We've asked John, he's working on putting together the next meeting because we need to tell him the process of where we're at on the rate program and some other issues are United. So we're hoping in the next month.
Oh, okay.
That's the goal.
Thank you.
Gerhard, if I might. On your Section 1 core tasks, agency record services, you list the website and weather station contract. It was mentioned before that we were possibly going to move one of our weather stations. I wonder how that was progressing, number one. Number two, and I didn't protest at the time, but at the time, last month, but it was stated in last month that the weather contract went for another 2 or 3 years. If you remember when we passed that, I was assured that that weather contract was cancelable annually. And so
the weather station contract is cancelable within, I think, a 30-day termination clause.
Well, that's what you assured me before. But if you look down on your next one, annual work plan, you know, you've got your irrigation allowance index program coming up, and I think those all go hand in glove. We need to get the weather station fixed.
Right. Rick, do you want to address the...
Sure, Dr. Kelly. We received a proposal from David Peak to relocate the weather stations and reprogram them. What we're working on right now is finding new locations. We've asked him to check with his group of people down here to see if he's got anybody down here that can help scope out new locations. We're not having a lot of luck with that. We have looked at the county aerial photos and have a preliminary list, and we'll be meeting with Robert Fastenal, the state CIMIS coordinator, pretty soon.
I thought the DWP person was going to lend you a hand.
He is. That's Robert Fastenal.
Okay, very good.
And the third thing we're doing, one of the things we've run into is people are a little bit unsure if they can find a location that meets all the CIMIS location requirements that Dr. Stiles recommends. They're very strict weather station requirements, and there's some concern that we might not be able to find everything that is required. So I've reached out to Dr. Stiles to tell him that we'd like to get a little more direction from him to see if there's any leeway with that.
Well, I appreciate your effort, but you know, as near as correct you can make it, because the goal, if you remember when we started, was to have something that's defendable.
Absolutely.
And if the location of the site is part of that, you want to have it as near good as you can.
Yes.
Okay. Gerard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the board. Again, for the record, Gerard Kapusik with agency staff. I'll pick up the bottom half of the presentation by transitioning from the work plans to the cost metrics in terms of the proposed budget. And this slide simply breaks out the 3 labor elements of the combined work plan numbers that you see on the spreadsheet. The PWAC charges reflect the staffing time of county Public Works Agency employees directed to work by the executive officer on agency work plan tasks that your board approves. And the way we optimize the use of a variety of different talents in the Public Works Agency is we pull from the folks based on the need as the executive director decides what's the best group of people. So it's not a matter of a single FTE. There are 2 or 3 key core people that work predominantly on the GMA, but there are also other people in the Public Works Agency whose skill sets are felt necessary to help achieve that. So the PWAC charges is the amalgamation of that. We have to blend that out for planning purposes, and when we look at that, as you can see, the costs range from a low of 53 to a high of 156, but we use a blended rate for budget planning purposes of $110 an hour. So for 11-12, as detailed in the spreadsheets before you, we're estimating just over 4,900 hours of Public Works Agency personnel at a blended rate of about $110 an hour, so it gets us to the 546 number at 2.3 FTEs. In addition, the work plan before you has legal service costs, and that is county counsel at approximately 178 hours. Level of effort is identified in the boxes under legal services, the routine board support, the contract administrations, the negotiation items, and the metrics are identified in the legal services box. And county counsel's rate for 11-12 is $185 an hour, which happens to be $5 an hour less than the current 10-11 rate. And assuming the board adopts that budget, board of supervisors, that would be the hourly rate for county counsel. So that's roughly estimated to be about $35,000. And then when you get to the detailed budget spreadsheet, we've also put in another $30,000 for outside special counsel, should you choose to use it. So the actual total legal counsel budget in 11-12 is $65,000, of which county counsel is $35,000 and $30,000 for outside. And then there is the joint technical services position, which in 10-11 was a 50-50 split in terms of cost of that position between the agency and United, and in 11-12 it is now a 3-way split. And so we've estimated approximately a third of Brian's hours would be fundable by the agency up to a maximum of $70,000 unless your board chooses otherwise. So in total, the level of effort in hours next year is projected at about 5,722 hours between Public Works employees, county council, and Brian's time. We estimate that's using an 1,800-hour productive time definition of an FTE, full-time equivalent, just a little over 3.18 FTEs, but it's a variety of people making up that 3.18, and that's consistent with the history of the agency over the last 5 fiscal years. And the total cost is about $651,000 in labor from those 3 sources in 11-12.
What was the joint technical position, the 612 hours? What was the number of hours last year, and what was the total cost to the agency last year?
900 hours was the projected through third quarter. The cost is about $51,000. The expectation is it may be close to $90,000. So we'd have about a $20,000 savings, assuming all that plan works out that way.
Thank you.
And then just so we frame it, the 912 hours was split between us and United, so if
it was actually 1,800 split 900
full-time. If you take this and do the same, it comes back
right.
to
and this is a little bit of an art and science thing, because Brian spends the time and then reports that, but the optimal ceiling is what you've set as the total amount of money you're willing to pay towards the cost of that, which in the current year was $90,000. The projected next year would be $70,000, unless you choose otherwise.
Okay.
Okay, so this table just reports the history of PWAC hours, FTEs, efforts, and costs. And as you can see, the 10-11 year-end projection, going back to Mr. Andrews' question early, is going to work out very close to about 3.5 FTEs at about the $107. So we're at that $110 an hour blended cost metric. So this just gives a historical background of the progression. This is probably the single most important slide in comparing the elements of the current work plan of 10-11 projected through year end, which is shown on the left-hand side of the slide in blue, both in hours, FTEs, and costs, and the 11, 12 columns on the right, and I see the column headings were carried over from last year. I apologize for that, but the green are 11, 12, and the blue is 10, 11 projected year end. So in effect, the slightly more detailed answer to the questions raised by Mr. Andrews is the very last bullet. Assuming that we reach at June 30th the annualized projection of where we are from the third quarter, our total work plan hours this year will be about 8,100, spread between 6,200 in PWAC, 196 for County Council, and 1,692 by Brian, at a projected cost of about $812,000, which is roughly 129% of the hours we had originally projected in the budget and 120% of the cost. And again, that's primarily a reflection of ramping up on getting these legacy tasks accomplished and completed, or substantially completed, that Gerhard mentioned earlier, which is why we've only recommended 7 tasks, additional tasks next year, to lesser effort, because we've completed a number of tasks as well. Now again, this is the best estimate. We may revise this as we get 10 accounting period 10 data in, and we come back to you next month, but this is our best level of guess for the current and the end of the current fiscal year and the future. This is just another way of displaying that information in pie charts. On the left-hand side, this is how, in terms of the core tasks, 1011 looks at about 50% associated with the administration of the agency, including the support of these board meetings and annual reports as identified in the work plan. About 31% associated with the record services, the databases, the allocation systems administration, the extraction systems. About 13% on technical and 6% legal. In 11-12, you see the proposed distribution based on the preliminary budget that is, of course, subject to your board's review and approval. And then when you throw in the additional work task, this same pie chart just expands to show the portion in green on the left-hand side in the current year that were the additional tasks. About 30% of our current effort this year was involved with additional work tasks. And in 11-12, where that's projected to be just a little under a quarter, or at 23%. But this just displays that same relative information in terms of the total efforts in both years. And the second summary table is just the roll-up of the sources and uses of funds. If we achieve the $1.3 million fund balance on June 30th at the very top, approximately $500,000 of that is sequestered by your board's policy, so therefore we can't use it to fund anything else next year. So $859,000 is available for future year funding. In terms of projection, we are projecting continuing to budget at 130,000 acre-feet in spite of the one-year dip, because 130,000 acre-feet over the history of this agency has been, on average, obviously, if it comes in less, there's less revenue, and we'd have to adjust at that point in time, unless your board chooses to use a different number. Interest earnings, as you all know, all interest earnings have tanked over the last year. The county pool fund is approximately 1% interest earnings quarter. It's projected to grow a little bit next year, but this is just the interest rate climate that we're all dealing with. We are proposing a very conservative surcharge projection, nothing but the 2 settlement payments that are legally required to be made, and a minimum number for other pumpers of $30,000. So the surcharge component of next year's budget is, and I see that number is 880. It's actually should be 230, but I'm sorry, 260. And I apologize for that. We missed that. And in 11-12 in the annual work plan, the numbers that are rolled up. So by year end of 11-12, it would be $1.2 million of expenditure requirements funded, and if we subtract the $1.2 million from the 1.8, we get $1.113 million, of which $505,000 is for the GEMS fund, and $608,000 is available for subsequent years funding for 2012 and beyond. So this is currently the roll-up of the budget.
Let me interrupt for a second. Mm-hmm. I'm glad you spoke to the $260,000, because I'm looking here at the 880, and that makes no sense at all. So Now, when you run, and I haven't done the addition here, when you run this addition up, and you just pulled essentially $600,000 out of the revenue side,
Right.
you're still, the
Yeah.
bottom number still is correct? You already accounted for it?
Yeah.
I didn't run the numbers here.
I apologize, it's in the quickness to try to complete the PowerPoints, we just missed this, but we have done the calculation. I'll provide you that detail of that information.
Do you have the correct total financing source available revenue number?
It is that number, 1,820,000.
How do you?
Hang on just one second here, let me,
Yeah. It may be me, but I cannot follow your plus or minuses as you go through this to come up with the numbers that you came up with.
that's correct. It's 1,544,492.
On which line?
On the line that's projected financing sources available.
Where it says 1.8.
It should be 15, what?
1,544,492.
Okay. Drop that down to the next blue line. Total estimate expenditure requirements still is a constant. That hasn't changed. Those numbers aren't wrong.
That's correct.
And the difference between the two, 1.2 minus, or 1.5 minus 1.2 is a little over 300,000.
Right.
So the retained earnings available for subsequent years is not 603. It's 300,000 plus or minus something. Right?
Correct.
And in previous years, our retained earnings, for example, going into this year, our retained earnings was 859,000.
That's correct.
So we're dropping essentially our reserves, if you want.
That's correct.
By $500,000.
Right.
That's a big change in reserves on essentially an expenditure, as a percentage of an expenditure of 1.5, a revenue base of 1.5 million, you're having a $500,000 swing. Right? Am I correct on that? Okay.
Remember that we are basically burning up the surcharge revenue in the proposals.
Okay. I have to take this call. Quick. If somebody
Go ahead. Just to receive and file. It's a study session.
Right.
Okay, do I have a motion to receive and file?
Well, I don't think he's finished with the presentation, are you, Gerhard?
Gerhard, are you finished or not?
Pretty much, yes.
Because I think you need to rerun these numbers and bring them back to the next session,
I
quite
will do
frankly.
that. I apologize for that.
Yeah. Okay, so David, you want to?
I had a question. If we would go back to page 5 of this handout, where it reads Section 2, Additional Work Tasks. At the very bottom, it says GMP Update, Plan Update Coordination Tasks.
Which page 5 of?
This is page 5 of this
Got it.
handout here.
Slide 9.
And it says plan update coordination tasks, and has a dollar amount of $39,600 as estimated cost. What goes into that item, or what are you thinking goes into that item?
Essentially, there will be efforts by Brian. He'll be the lead on that. There'll be some coordination, facilitation on scoping of our existing document, where we want to take updates or revisions, and where we need to go forward with that. So I'm going to look to Brian, because I think we had anticipated that he'll be leading that effort along with many of us as well, in terms of forward-looking in terms of are we going to take this plan, where does it need to be updated, who should do that update, is it something that we can do in-house, is there consultant services that we need to do, and looking towards how we're going to accomplish that plan update in the 2012 year.
So that dollar figure represents either what you think you might spend yourselves in-house or what you might hire a consultant to do.
Right. It essentially will be in-house labor costs at this point is what we anticipate.
And if you could clarify for me, this is the GMA groundwater management plan,
Yes.
which underneath, I would imagine, has the Las Posas basin-specific plan and perhaps the Oxnard basin-specific plans. Those various elements combine to make
Exactly.
GMA's
It could
plan.
be developed in such a manner in that in the past we've essentially rolled up all the basins into one management plan, which is what we have today. Now you have the specific plan update that's being accomplished at the Las Posas user group. We envision perhaps something similar for the Oxnard Plain PV area. That may be where that plan update goes next, or it may say we need to focus in on the Oxnard Plain and some of those issues, as well as rolling in that Las Posas specific plan. So it may be a combination of taking what's been done with the specific plan updates and then looking to see where the rest of the basins need to be updated and priorities. Essentially a prioritization exercise where the board, the agency should go for the next 5 years in terms of its resources.
Can I answer that a little more specifically? It's your board's direction to us, as we understand it right now, that we're going to start moving towards specific basin planning. It's clear that the one size doesn't fit all, and you just need to look at the 4-bay to realize that. This plan will probably, this update will probably include the Las Posas basin plan, specific basin plan, unlikely to include Oxnard, but Oxnard's planning efforts may affect it. In this time, it will also include the presentations to your board, the input from stakeholders, and all the various responses to that. So this is a relatively conservative number. As you know, our consensus building efforts have frequently taken a lot more time than that, and on something as big as the update to the plan, we feel that this is a relatively conservative number.
I appreciate the explanation. I mean, my eyes always go to the biggest dollar item and look at that one first, and I'm glad you clarified what I had envisioned myself from hearing at these previous meetings, that our new management plan is actually going to be a combination of sub-plans that look at specific locations and basins. And okay, very good.
Mr. Chairman, if I could recover here, because I realized what has happened. If you'll take the item, the spreadsheet here, item 9B, the fiscal 10-11.
Okay.
Very bottom.
The slide, take slide 9B.
Not the slide, the spreadsheet, the 11 by 17 spreadsheet. 9B.
9.
The very bottom.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
9B.
Right there, 9B, see it?
9B. Okay. Yeah.
And if you look at the gray column, which is the 11-12 preliminary requested budget, what didn't make it in the slide but is calculated is a presumed $165,000 in state grant funding under the LGAP, assuming your board approves it, with offsetting expenditures in that year. So if you'll go through the calculations very quickly from vertical top to bottom on the gray, we start off with $859,000 in the fund balance, $520 in pump charges, 15 in interest, 260 in surcharge, 165, 660 in reimbursement from the state grant. If your board approves it, that's the portion of it. If your board were to approve it at this meeting, or not this meeting, but the next meeting, or thereafter, that would be potentially recoverable next year from the state. And then you go back, you get to the 1.8 million, 220, 152 total funds available number, and then you start deducting the expenditures in the plan, including the LGAP expenditures of 187, 860, which is a combination of the reimbursable amount of 165 plus the 20,000 local match, which is shown as footnote number 12. The totals then come out. So the mistake is that this slide table just did not capture that spreadsheet table. So I do apologize that as we were transitioning over. But the actual calculation is correct off the spreadsheet.
Okay. Since you've got this spreadsheet out, and I recognize this is a study session, and we're not going to make a decision today on the budget, let me just speak to what I'm seeing here. If you go back to the top, I'm still on 9B, up at the top, in the top box where it says revenues, and then there's a, if you look across the line for 1011, we had surcharge penalties of like of $490-some thousand, actual year-to-date of $433. We recognize that some of that surcharge is going to go away given the pumping changes. If you take that $230,000, that 230, and that 165 that we're going to get projected next year, you just explained it as a state grant. If you back those numbers out and still go down to the bottom of the column where it says ending fund balance. Ending fund balance projected this year is going to have, now that also includes the GEMS fund, okay.
No, the 608 is exclusive of the GEMS fund. The GEMS fund is below it at 500,000. So on a cash basis.
Okay, there we go.
Right.
Where is it?
The reason the 500,000 is pulled off the top part of the spreadsheet, it's a sequester.
Okay. What I'm looking at then, let me just jump down to the bottom and then we'll back in, tell me how we got there. If you look at the bottom where it says ending fund balance, that green, big long green line left to right, starting in year 08, 09, 9, 10, and working its way projected out to years 15, 16. And what you see is, in the last 2 years, an ever-decreasing end fund balance. And in fact, we're bankrupt at the end of the fiscal year 15.
Correct. Assuming the continuation of this cost and the revenue under current situation in 15, 16, you'll have burned up all of the retained settlement payment earnings, and has to be adjustments on either side of the balance sheet.
Even if you assume 130,000 acre-feet of water as the projected pump charge revenues, that's what your footnote is on the top. Pump
Correct.
Charge, note 3, projected 130,000 acre-foot. And in fact, the reality is we're trying to figure out ways to drive that number down. We've got to get that down to 100,000 to make Dr. B incredibly happy and all of us happy. Assuming you drive that down, assuming you take our pump charges and drive them from $4 up to $5, you're only adding $130,000 at the 130,000 acre-foot number into the equation, and it still doesn't reverse the fact that by the time you hit year 15, 16, it's a wash. You're still broke.
That's correct. Your board's business model before we got the bump up of surcharge was run the fund balances down as far as you can under the assumptions with the understanding that you can always adjust each year what level of service, what staffing, and what have you. But structurally in 14, 15, you start moving into an unbalanced condition.
If you go through the history of the agency in terms of our desire to be a very thin organization, full-time employees, the work we do, I think the agency over time has done a good job of trying to do a good job of steward of the constituents' money. And yet, when you actually look at the problems that we face, the irrigation efficiency, the problems in the Las Posas Basin, the problems in the Oxnard Plain, the difficulty of bringing the GREAT program on at a cost equation that satisfies the city of Oxnard and the growers and the like. You look at the capital expenditure that the city of Oxnard is making in putting in a dual plumbing system, effectively, of Rose Avenue, right next to our ranch. Later this year, they're going to rip that up from, I think, the freeway or Gonzales Road up to Willie. They're going to have to repave it in the process. They're going to drop in, they're going to update the primary feed line from United and the blending station right there at Rose and Gonzales, and they're going to drop in the major artery for reclaimed water. It's exactly what they just finished doing on Ventura Boulevard. If you look at what Camarillo is doing and projecting out, and Kiegas and the folks in that area, major funds are going to be expended to try to bring us down to bring us into safe yield. That was the projection where we needed to be when we created the 20-year, 5-year pumping reduction plan to get to safe yield. We're not there. We're going to have to come up with some new strategies over the next 20 years to get that last incremental water and get us back into safe yield. And what I see here is, no matter how thin we can get, when a problem is brought to us and people explain the issue of that problem, it's a logical problem. It's a real problem. It's got to be addressed. We can't allow the agency to be turned over to a bunch of litigation water wars. We've got to do our business to try to somehow bring some kind of balance to these aquifers. And as Jeff said and we've said, we're going to have to do it on a regional basis, a basin basis, rather than the big common pie that we have out there. All of the cities, I believe, in the county, Ventura, Moorpark, Semilla is looking at what they have to do, even though in some areas they're out of our boundary. Camarillo, Oxnard, everybody is doing what they have to do to try to bring reality to the fact that we have a valuable and limited resource. This agency, I think, was put in place to help put some kind of framework to make sure that the game was played pretty much fair across the board, and we're running out of money. I recall 6-7 years ago when the Ojai Area Groundwater Agency, and I don't know their official name up there, when they put that element in place and they began that process, they went back to the state and they got approval to run their pump charge up to $25. And I remember didn't say her name right. Dee, yes. She came and said, hey, this is a chance for the GMA to piggyback on that process to get our $6 changed. And I said, you know what, that I'm not sure I want to fight that fight, and one, and number two, that was what we agreed to. But somewhere along the line in this discussion, we've got to make a decision. Either we're going to have a GMA that is going to be a steward of the things that are going on, or we're going to go use another methodology. And if in fact we're going to have to make the GMA functional, there are costs associated with that, and the numbers that we're projecting out don't lend thatself long term. And if we don't come to grips with it beginning today, so we can plan for tomorrow, we're going to run out of money fairly quickly. And as I go through this work tasks and the like, I don't see any specific one that jumps out at me and says, shoot, lop out $300,000 off the top and we're back into balance. You know, and I'm glad Dave brought up the issue of the $39,000, what it all means, and it makes logical sense. But at $39,000, it doesn't get us there. It needs 10 of those projects to get us where we need to be to sustain what we're doing. So I have concerns that I think staff has done a great job of squeezing everything down and showing us a number how we can get through next year. But as I look out in the future, I have real concerns in the direction we're going. I mean, if United, just take my entity, United, essentially, this would be equivalent to us cutting our reserves by 50% year over year. Ho, ho, ho. I can tell you, the United Board won't do that. I mean, and the constituents, I think, would say that's irresponsible if we did that. I don't think the county can cut its reserves by 50%, or the cities. I mean, cutting your reserves by that amount is a huge movement. And given the fact that we're dealing with small relative dollars to other agencies, it's a big hit. I don't know what the answer is, but I think it's worthy of a discussion, and that's why I bring it up.
I think you're absolutely right, and mechanically we tried to do what you asked us to do, which is essentially play the model out. The good news is there was surcharge revenue in these last settlement revenues that came in that bought certain time. But as you can see here, we are not recommending the continuation of the GSEP under this model because in 11-12, the priority is towards GMP update. And now, this is a conservative model in revenue in terms of the surcharge. You could get more, but I think it's better to be conservative for the very reasons you've identified. But I think in terms of, if I could make a recommendation to the board, is some subsequent multi-budget year study session ought to happen sometime early in 11-12, where precisely these kinds of questions, the policy integration with the fiscal integration happens so that the model can be revised.
Okay. Steve, do you want to speak?
I just wanted to point out, I think you make a good point, and the issue, I think the fundamental issue is to the extent that we do have revenue sources, surcharges, fines, unexpected things, we need to hold on to those because I think that there are very important things that the agency is going to have to do in the future as water becomes more precious and the issues of the aquifer and the challenges and the complications. And at least my understanding is we are where we are because there was a clear direction from this board to staff that we didn't want to be carrying over those larger reserves, and I think this may be time for us to rethink that policy, and whether we do that with when we adopt this when it comes back, or we do that in a study session in the fall. But I've been uncomfortable with that policy from the time that we adopted it. So.
And I'm not opposed to constantly, we do it at United, and everybody does it. That's the nature of the business, looking at our reserves. I'm not opposed to knocking the reserves down. But when you knock the reserve down essentially by close to 50%, whoa, that's a big number. That's not in the realm of, well, it's in the realm of we need to ask if that's really what we want to do. Mike?
Yeah, I think, though, the direction of getting away from being addicted to penalty money is a good thing. And that if we spread the income balance across the whole pumping universe, it's a more fair and equitable than our goal to protect the underground reserves should be more against relying on penalty money, because penalty money doesn't solve the water problem. And so whatever we can do to balance pumping against recharge and lead away from penalty money, I think is a good thing, because then we lower the extraction in excess of recharge, and then we learn to find another way to get fed.
However, the penalties might help us with our extraction problems.
Well, that's true. I mean, penalties is a deterrent to excessive extraction, hopefully, but not always. So, to solve that problem seems to me will help the thing a lot if we can get these alternate supplies underway. And that, there was some disagreement whether to call that new water or refound water or whatever kind of water we want to name it. But certainly in the Las Posas, that was the whole thing of this morning's discussion. And I think we're well underway of trying to get that solved to some extent. But obviously the GRAPE project and all the other projects have to come along. And Chairman Mulhart is correct, is that there's a lot of discussion to be done. But I like the idea of getting away from so much penalty.
Okay.
As soon as the penalties can no longer be eligible to be charged. I mean, if somebody's eligible for penalties, charge them, but don't get addicted to it.
It may be helpful to recognize that from a strict structural balance standpoint, at the maximum statutory authority of $6 an acre foot at 130,000 acre foot, you're going to earn $780,000. So effectively, that's your bright line in the sand. If a political decision is made to go to that maximum, that's the most you could get, assuming you have that consistency of 130,000 acre feet. So a structurally balanced budget in the out years tied to those constraints is at roughly that order of magnitude.
Okay. Dave, do you have any comment?
Well, I'd like to hear from some of the public members, but we've lost many of the public. I've heard exactly the opposite from when we had these discussions in the past. We had the public telling us that we needed to live within our means. We had the public telling us we were too flush, that we were living off of penalty monies, and I'm a firm believer in that. We can't state on one hand that we should be lean and mean, and then on the other hand be carrying $1 million balances. I think giving this $500,000 back in these water projects, which we've done this year, just this meeting, was a really good thing. That demonstrates to the community that we're not interested in building a bureaucracy, building another agency. We're going to do our job efficiently and within the realm of the fees we collect. And then we're in economic times where not just ag, but businesses and folks in M&I they don't need increased costs. And so I would hazard to guess that we have a lot of the public who don't agree with that concept of carrying large reserves.
Neil, any comments?
I have a hard time thinking of them as reserves. But to the extent that that is what they are, in my view, you need to carry an adequate reserve for any organization. Now, what's adequate? That's the key question. And there are different ways to define that. I'm not sure I can tell you what I think is adequate here. But I do believe that you need to have a reserve balance because there are unexpected events that you will have to respond to at some time or later, sooner or later. On the other hand, I know that my constituents in my city aren't interested in paying higher fees to the extent that that increasing pumping charges and so forth affect them. In this time especially, it would be very difficult. So the question I have in my mind is, what of the work plan that's being proposed and being projected into the future can either be deferred or adjusted or simply abandoned, and what is the core work plan? And are we doing, in fact, are we achieving the core mission for the organization? And clearly, getting the aquifers in balance in terms of the use is the core mission, if we can. I think that if I were here on a regular basis, I'd be arguing for honing this down to the tasks that really get that job done. Thank you.
If the rear view mirror was a bit longer, the 08, 09, go back 07, 08, and 06, 09, the operating expenses of 562 in 09 reflects more what was the whole pattern for many years, and then suddenly, we jumped well forward because of the influx of new incomes. And that's my point, is that, getting addicted to new incomes, then you overeat your budget. So,
folks, comments?
Rob Saperstein for the City of Oxnard. Won't repeat some of the statements board members all made. I think they're all relevant and important. And again, my comment is stepping back from a policy level of what the GMA, if it's going to continue to participate in the water management in this community, what's missing from the budget, perhaps the most important piece is the go-forward look at restructuring a credit program, if that's what needs to happen. There's been lots of dialogue about conservation credits and lots of tension over conservation credits. If new policy is going to be crafted, that's going to take some time. Ag efficiency, going to take some time. There are folks that are very concerned about if we're going to move toward the demand side of the equation, how we truly have an impact in policy on that. The ag to M&I conversion has been before your board already. Maybe it comes back again. Those are fundamental policy provisions that this GMA is operated by without a whole lot of tension. If those things are continue to nip at our heels or at our butts, those are big policy questions that go to the core of the way this agency operates. Those things aren't budgeted for, having workshops, having the kind of dialogue that's necessary to do those kinds of ordinance changes if that's required. So I could see snipping away at some things that the staff does, but if the GMA is going to participate in sort of the forward-looking process, it's going to take pretty meaningful effort. So the City of Oxnard doesn't want to see having more revenue demands going out. It'd like to be able to recoup some of its costs of the GRAPE program. Realistically, it's just going to get more and more expensive. I don't have a good answer for it, but I know that those are the challenges that are coming.
Okay, thanks, Rob. I knew I'd get you up here. Very good. Robert.
Robert Arania with Crestview Mutual Water Company. Compared to some of you there, I'm a relative newbie for attending the GMA. I've only been around for about 10 years, 15 years participating in these. And a couple things that I've spotted over the years, though, I don't quite see it as such a bad situation as you do, Chair. For one instance, the contingency amount of $100,000 that you have in here typically is not used. That is money that is set aside and reserved exactly for what it's supposed to be, contingencies. But when the staff does hit it, it typically is in small amounts, and you get the majority of that back at year end. So there's about $500,000, I'll be reasonable, $400,000 that over the next 5 years is going to come back in, and it's not actually a loss. It's conservative, and I appreciate that. The other thing is that while I don't have the documentation in front of me, something that I kept coming back and was reminded of is that since day one that I've been attending these meetings, every year there's always... Daniel! There seems to be an out year somewhere in the budget where we went negative. And when I get done with this meeting, I'm going to go back and double check and pull my records from the 10 years that I've been attending this. But this seems to be, for myself, my memory in my head, a consistent pattern that is somewhere in about 4 to 5 years out, we were seeing how the organization would fundamentally have to change. And here we are another 10 years down the line, and that day's still another 5 or 10 years out. So my point is, as I look at this and the historical pattern of the agency, this is a conservative budget that has a doomsday date in it that we haven't ever reached yet, and I'm not sure that we're going to.
Okay, the only comment I'd make to that one is if you go back, for those of us that have been here more than 10 years, if you look at the original GMA pump charge, I think our original pump charge was $1.50. And we sat on $1.50 because I think our limit was $3. I think it was something absurd. And it took us almost 2.5 years of debate and going to Sacramento and arguing with Tom McClintock about having the state give us the big brother go-ahead to take it to $6. And we revved it up to $6 for a while to generate a contingency fund, and we brought it back down to $4. That 4 number's been with us for some time. So in each of those, if you do go back and do your analysis, you will see that our out years showed a negative. And the way we dealt with it is we looked out over the horizon and said, at some point in time, we're going to have to come to grips with costs, in fact, are going up. And we dealt with it by taking it from $1.50, I think, and I could be wrong on that number, up to $3, getting the state to give us the authority to go to $6 when as I said, when Ojai Groundwater Agency went to 25, and I was asked, do I want to think the GMA ought to piggyback on that? And I said, no, that's not who we are and what we do. And so, anyway, although we have always seen negative out in the horizon, we have made fundamental adjustments to it in terms of the pump charge rate that we could go to or getting legislative relief. And so anyway, so when you do your analysis, make sure you recognize we have changed that dollar amount.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Carol Schoen, Zone Mutual Water Company, Chairman Mulhart and the board. I would just like to express a concern over the item number 7.
Could I ask you to bring both microphones together so we could hear you a little bit better? Say that one to your left. Yeah, bring them both in. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
All right, when you say item number 7.
Item number 7 on the agenda has been put off to the month of July, and that concerns quite a bit of the monies that are...
Okay, all right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Is
so...
it reference to the item number 9?
On the action items today, the grant program for automatic meter...
Yes,
reading,
we've rolled,
you've rolled it to July.
Yes.
But it's a great deal a part of this budget. So if we're going to act on this budget at the next meeting in June, but we're not going to talk about this metering, which really can have ramifications of a tremendous amount of cost, in talking with Dr. Kelly about this, I'm wondering about the timing. So we're going to go ahead and decide on a budget at the next meeting, and then decide on this whole metering thing after we've decided on our budget. And I think it's kind of out of step.
Okay.
I can answer that question if you like, Chair Mulhart.
Okay.
We got the request from a board member yesterday. We didn't have time to adjust the materials. Because it's been moved to July by your board, we'll remove it from the budget package. And if you do act on it in July in the positive, we'll amend the budget at that time.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Steve Nash, City of Oxnard, and I want to congratulate Chairman Mulhart for his synopsis as a planning commissioner. It's always nice to have a staff report translated into English. I ran some quick figures on the on your ultimate goal of trying to reduce the drawdown of the aquifer from 130,000 acre feet down to 100,000 acre feet, and that 30,000 acre feet, according to my quick calculations, translates to about a little under 27 million gallons a day. With the AWPF, its maximum capacity will only be 24 million gallons a day. So there is some, if all of that water gets utilized to offset the Fox Canyon withdrawal rates. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mike.
Mike Solomon, United Water. I'll just echo what Rob said. I think that the board needs to recognize that when the GMA started several years ago, things are really different now. And the issue of the cumulative credits, allocation, the ag efficiency, there are a lot of issues that we've got to deal with, and the GMA is going to have to change. And I see it as you're going to have to take a very strong role in these changes. We thought we'd be at safe yield. We're still at 30, maybe 40,000 acre feet overdraft. We've got to deal with this. Your staff's going to be real busy. The GRAPE program, as I work with the Oxnard on the GRAPE program, there's some really important issues that the GMA is going to have to make some decisions that will determine how Oxnard runs their program and how we do ours, our injection project. So I think the message coming from an agency that's got a 46% rate increase out there right now because we're having to deal with real problems and take care of real issues to solve the overdraft issue, protect our resource, I would not recommend that you be cheap on your organization. You got some serious decisions to make. We got a lot of, I think a lot of changes coming as far as how we do things around here, and we're not going to do that by just saying status quo or lessening the effort. So I would support it. I mean, nobody wants to pay more, but if we screw this up, it's going to cost a lot more to try to fix it in the long run. So that's my comments.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Anybody else? Before everybody goes running out to your constituents and said Mulhart's gone off his rocking horse again, he's on his birthday, the adulation that he has received from this audience has gone to his head, and he has now climbed to the hill to be... Stop. Dementia, yeah. Dementia has set in, and he may be your pilot, so be careful. That's all I can tell you. If you want the landing gear down, you'll listen to me. Otherwise, we're not going to play this game. So, listen, I don't have the answers. And I know that when I started, it was assigned by United some umpteen years ago to be on this agency, and John Flynn sat right there and says, Lynn, you can run it for a while. I'm tired of running it. So now I got tasked with this thing, and it's been a great run. But one of the things I think I've been successful at is trying to be fair and honest to people about what I see in the future. And 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I thought we would wrap up the bulk of these problems and I could go retire to the sunset and you wouldn't be wishing me happy birthday today at age 63. That did not happen. In fact, the reverse is happening. The problems that we're dealing with today are vastly more complex than the problems we had in the past. I never thought when I joined the United board some 25 plus years ago that United would have in 1.5 years create an environmental department and have, when we're done, before this year and next year's out, we'll have 6 full-time people dealing with environmental issues. I never thought that we would have, after I was president of the board at United when we dedicated the Freeman diversion, I never thought we would have a group in this county trying to figure out a way to bulldoze that sucker out of the ground. I never thought that would happen. I never thought that we would have a case where the Los Posas Basin and the Oxnard Plain are still in overdraft after we put a 25-year plan in place. And the mandate for this agency is very clear. It comes from the state of California. We're not a county agency, we're a state agency. And this mandate from the state is you will bring your aquifer into safe yield. And we're not there, folks. It's that simple. Now, you can argue that this little piece over here and that little piece is, but in the macro, and in fact in the basins across the board, the staff that United has spent, we spent a lot of money to put a very technical groundwater department. We've catapulted that groundwater department by bringing on even more specialists and tied Brian into that on the benefit of the GMA, and now Kiegas is joined in that process because we need to know exactly what the aquifer is doing, and everything our specialists are telling us is we're not there at safe yield. And we've got some folks out there that want to have outside consultants look at it. Great. The more people that look at it, I believe at the end, we'll find out that the aquifer is not in safe yield. The city of Ventura is spending huge amounts of money. The city of Oxnard is going to spend a huge amount of money. The city of Camarillo has looked at this issue numerous times. The funding that we just approved today, because we got some penalty money, and I agree with you, Mike, we cannot run our business on the back of penalty money, because if we're actually successful, that money should disappear. Exactly. That means I can close the doors and you won't be celebrating my 70th birthday or whatever, you know. The fact of the matter is that the cost of running this agency is going up. And I believe that as we go through each of these tasks that we've assigned staff to do, and we've given them the task of reporting to us what they're doing, and they have been reporting to us what they're doing on a monthly basis for the last 2 years, and not once have we said, you know what, blow that task out of the water, we don't need it anymore. In fact, we have said, you're doing the right things. These problems are more complex. Now, what's the alternative? The alternative is we say, we'll just kind of keep the GMA under wraps and it won't really cause any ripples. And when the city of Oxnard and the city of Ventura have a major disagreement, we're going to go to litigation. When the city of Camarillo and the city of whatever have a major disagreement, we're going to go to litigation. And so maybe that's an alternative. We just go to litigation and get on with it, and we'll just close up shop and we'll turn it over to one guy called a judge, and if he has the capacity to understand the complexity of the issues that we deal with, then he is one bright guy. But he doesn't. He does not have the capacity to do that, but he has the power of the court. We can give ourselves that power and give ourselves the capacity to understand the problem, but it ain't going to come cheap. I don't believe that this budget that we have next year is a doom budget. It may be workable, but as I look forward, I don't like the trend that this budget is indicating. And I don't see that the work problem is getting easier. If anything, it's getting more complex. And the perfect example I can give you is when United and the United board sits down and is driving its reserves down so it can come in at a 46% rate increase, we know we're running into a logjam down the road. To eliminate our reserves going down, and we don't have excessive reserves, I don't think anybody does, we should be at about a 67% rate increase. It's unsellable. We just had this discussion at the board meeting but last week. No one will buy that. So we're burning some cash up, driving our reserves down, but we're not driving them down 50%. That's what concerns me. And so I appreciate everything that everybody says, and I don't want to see the GMA go into the sunset and not have relevancy. And if it does, then the legal team of the world is going to take over because the problems will not go away. And I appreciate the complexity that every one of our constituents have. But the truth of the matter is, if we don't figure out how to put water in our faucets and water on the table, our way of life, whether it's the city, the recreation we enjoy, or the farming that puts thousands upon thousands upon thousands of our folks to work, if we do not pay for the solutions to make sure that we don't get sideways with each other, if we don't put a system in place to take care of that, we will have a huge litigation process and we will all pay for it. And I believe that the way the GMA was set up is in fact the agency to act as that peaceful adjudicator of the problems we have. And to give us the power to do that so that the attorneys that represent the cities have the respect that the GMA in fact can get things done and can have some power behind it and can in fact make a ruling that everybody will abide by, we got to make it effective. And to do that, you got to pay for it. So I don't think it's a question of being cheap and living within our means per se. I believe it's facing the reality that the world as we knew it a few years ago is in fact changing. And I think that this budget over time, and maybe this coming year is not the year to do it, but if we keep going in this direction, we're going to have to face it pretty soon. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. So don't go out and shoot the messenger. Please don't do that. I appreciate the birthday gift. But I'm raising, I think, an alarm. In my estimation, I see this and I see an alarm. And we're going to have to face it. Anybody else have any other comments about this issue? Any other stuff that you want to say on this report? We've now received the budgeting report. I'm watching the clock tick by. It will be back on the agenda.
Right.
And we'll debate it again at that point. Anybody else?
When's it coming back?
When's it coming back?
Next month.
Next month. Dan, Nam, and Danny?
I think the only thing I would like to add, Lynn, and to the board is whether you're an ag person or the city of the different cities, everybody needs to plan ahead. So whether it's projects or environmental issues, whatever the GMA, one of the tasks you have to do is well-defined definition of credits, review the efficiencies. I want to echo what Rob and Mike said. But that needs to be on the top of the list, because if you can't do that, how can the cities plan for their water usage? How can the ag industry, whether it's efficiency or historical allocation of what they have? But the main thing is get the aquifer and everything in balance. But you still have to have well-defined terms that people can live with so they can plan ahead. And I think that's the only thing I'd like to add.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, we're at item number 10, which is the administrative report. Anybody have any questions on any of these items? All right. The meeting will be adjourned to the June 22nd meeting. Before I go, one last chance. Anybody else? Rob, one last chance. Yeah, very good. Okay, meeting adjourned until the June 22nd meeting, or the call of the chair. Thanks. Here we go.